You're listening to the Integrated Business Planning Podcast, where we share stories of business transformation with your host, Lance Tyler, founder and CEO of ActionKPI.
Mattlan, thank you for joining the podcast today. Really excited to have you on. Why don't we get started with just an introduction, to yourself, your role, and then morning routine that you do or how you start your day.
Sounds good, Lance. Yeah, I'm excited to be here as well too. And I know that as I've gotten to know you over the last couple of months, I've been excited with the work that you do and with how it could help out our organization myself as well too. So my name, Mattlan Hogenson. I'm the CFO at Southland Trailers. I've been in that role since 2017. Kind of straight out of my college education. I grew up here in Southern Alberta, and this is kind of where I've stuck around. So we're a manufacturing organization. We manufacture industrial trailers of all various types and sizes. So I've kind of been through all gamuts of the company, the organization, from production roles to logistics to the finance side, warranty, sales, kind of everything in between. So I feel like I have a half decent understanding of the business as a whole. And that's allowed me to really kind of understand how finance can help out the rest of the organization. So my morning routine, like we've talked before, I really don't like mornings. I'm not a morning person. I hate mornings. But so generally, if I can roll out of bed, and then I'll be happy. But lots of coffee. I really didn't drink coffee until I was starting my accounting designation, and that's when I really started my accounting designation around the same time that started having a family. So throw a brand new baby in there with lots of extra school and work. The only way I survived was caffeine. So, but no, from a work perspective, my mornings, we do a lot of transactional business with the US. So I'm always looking at the currency markets, kind of financial news, throughput from production from the night before. Kind of things like that, just like cursory reports to see how the day went the day before, what we need to do as far as making changes to ensure that we're winning for the day ahead.
Awesome. That's great. And having a baby, doing a designation, that's good on you. I know. Just doing the designation itself with a full-time job is hard going. So cool. So again, I want to kick off with, and I know we've spoken, obviously, and get to know each other the last couple of months. And Southland has gone through quite a big growth cycle, or quite a bit of growth over the last few years.
Mm-hmm.
And when we spoke, you mentioned, there was you kind of hovering around 80, and then you've really grown, and you're now at about 550 staff, right? And
yeah,
a lot more capacity. So, based off that, wanted to just talk about, the process you went through in deciding, how you how you looked at that scalability. And I know we talked about, you look at kind of scaling up framework, setting BHAG, your big, hairy, audacious goal. So maybe why don't we talk a bit about the process, your experience kind of applying that, and just how it helped you during that period of growth that you're going through right now.
Yeah, that framework, I guess, the strategic direction that we've kind of set for ourselves has been really, really important. And that started back, like it's been a journey for sure. And like all things, sometimes the fruit that comes to bear from that journey, like it starts out really slow. and then it gains momentum as you continually do the right things right. So our journey, if I can throw a plug out for Burn Harnish and scaling up, that whole philosophy has been really, really monumental to the growth of our business. But ultimately that started back in 2013. And that's when we really defined for ourselves, like you mentioned, that big, hairy, audacious goal. So like if we could think of something that was completely, like it at the time seemed impossible for us to achieve, what would that be, right? So we set a goal for ourselves, a goal in 2035 to manufacture probably 20 times the amount of trailers that we were manufacturing at the time. So, and with the current infrastructure and our staff and everything like that, like we couldn't understand how that could even be possible.
Yeah.
But having that goal in front of us allowed us to kind of work the numbers backwards. So even though it was, a stretch goal at the time that would have been 22 years away, you can kind of say, okay, where are we at currently? If that's where we want to be in 2035, you can start building the road in between. So from a huge stretch goal, we were able to break that down into annual targets, and then from there, break it down into quarterly targets, and really understand where we wanted to be 3 months from now. And that's all we would focus on. And that's all we really currently focus on today, is where we want to be by the end of this quarter. So you kind of just take it one small step at a time.
Yeah.
And when you break down a goal like that, you realize that, if I'm building 10 trailers today, the goal at the end of the quarter is how do we build 11, right? And then all of a sudden that big, hairy, audacious goal, which seems insurmountable, seems really realistic and achievable. So that's, from a nutshell, I guess, a high level 50,000 foot perspective. That's kind of where we've started, and it's just kind of organically grown from there.
And on that journey, you said 2013, when you set these targets, were you always hitting them? Was it just like, great, we keep smashing targets, or was it like, oh man, okay, we gotta, this year's maybe come down, we're not as, where we want to be. I mean, maybe talk a little in between on,
it's never
to the team, right? Because sometimes morale can be like, oh, we should have been here, but
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's never been a straight line. Like life's never, you always see the success in people and think that, like you admire where people are currently, but you don't see the rocky road or the mountain that they've climbed to get there, with the peaks and valleys, right? So it's been a lot more winding of a road than we'd like it to be at times. And a lot of that has to, like market forces come into play. We think that we're going to really, see growth in a specific product line, and that's just not materializing. So then you have to pivot. So, that 20 plus year goal is something that you can't just slap it up on the wall and forget about it, right? It's a constant conversation as to what we're seeing in the marketplace. And that really ties into, I guess, a production conversation. And our production managers can say, okay, we think that we can go from 10 to 12 on this product line, and this is what we need to be able to get there. Or we've got capacity over here that we can utilize. So it's a conversation that the entire organization's having on a weekly basis in each of our like Monday morning production meetings. we try to have all of our meetings at the beginning of the week, so that you can kind of solve the issues and then just worry about the, running the business throughout the remainder of the week. But those goals are reviewed, and it's just a quick little check-in to say, like, okay, we're still on track, right? Or then if there's issues that arise from a sales perspective, then we can address those and pivot accordingly. Something that we've learned over the years is it's a lot easier to, if you've got visibility on sales, that's something that we've tried to build into our management systems.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to deal with volatility with the sales team than it is to deal with volatility with the production team. So in years past, we've had issues where the market kind of surprises us, and then we make adjustments to production to meet market demand.
Yeah.
But if you curtail a production line, it's really, really difficult to bring that production line back on.
It takes
versus kind of just dealing with, right? It's difficult. It's easy to go from 10 to 5, but it is really difficult to go from 5 to 10. So if you can deal with that volatility with your sales team, then there's a lot more continuity in the business.
Interesting. You meant, and again, I think to kind of focus on that journey as well. What were some of the struggles that you had initially, or maybe things that are still ongoing? Obviously, you mentioned market volatility, things of that nature, but
yeah.
Anything else when you started the journey or during the journey?
It's interesting. It probably took us a good 6 to 9 months to figure out what the core values and the purpose of the business was. So at that time, it's a family-run organization. So we're kind of transitioning from the first generation of the family to the second generation of the family. So we were kind of in a good place to really define what our identity was as a business. But the conversation around core values was really, really important to us, because we didn't want, values to be just boilerplate things that you post on a poster.
Integrity.
Don't really follow, right? Like, you see a lot of businesses that we operate with integrity and you put customers first and things like that, right? But when you really get under the hood of the business, those values aren't being followed, right? So there was a lot of conversation around what our core values were, because those should not really change, and those are something that should drive every facet of the business, and the decisions that we're making should align with those values, right? And ultimately drive us towards our purpose, which we've focused, I guess, in on the idea of empowering people to do it better. So really the idea that business there's more to business than just making money, but if you're doing business right, then you are helping people live better lives.
Yeah. So important.
So, it was a struggle to kind of to really, it's a hard conversation to have too, when you're looking introspectively at yourselves and asking the questions like, what are our fundamental beliefs? Mm-hmm. So once we kind of, as a management team and through team member surveys and things like that, really understood what our core values were, I think the first initial struggle was making sure that everyone was on board, because you had some old guard management at the time that thought that the business should be run a different way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So having to kind of align the team around kind of the new strategy and vision of the business, there was a little bit of turmoil there. But once we kind of understood what our foundation was, then everything else has kind of just fallen into place. Not to say that it's been easy, right?
No.
But
Yeah.
you definitely know where you're going. And despite the bumps and rocks and detours in the road, you still have that clarity as to where you want to be.
Absolutely. And from a core values perspective, obviously, because I'm a big believer in that too. And, and that really should drive organizational behavior as well. So how do you track, measure, ensure that core values are being upheld?
So first off, we make sure that our core values are always visible. So we've got quarterly posters depending on, every quarter we've got new quarterly posters that list out our objectives and goals for the quarter. The foundation of every one of those posters is our core values. It's built into our performance management systems. So we do weekly check-ins with team members and quarterly performance reviews. Like every wage review that we have is built around the core values. So we're managing performance for all of us based off of our core values. So, and then it's internal training. All of our leadership training will discuss core values and how examples of how we are living or how we could do better with living our core values. So it's a constant conversation. And as an organization, as an individual, for myself, I'm always learning as to how I could be better at open communication or positive attitude or leading with humility, right? So things like that.
Yeah. And during this year, has there been much change in the management team, or has it been pretty
No,
just that you guys have all gone through this kind of growth together and grown together?
Yeah, our core management team has been pretty consistent over the last 4 or 5 years, I'd say. So it's grown from, I guess, that original team back in 2013. Once we kind of figured out who wanted to be on the bus and who we wanted on the bus,
Yeah.
It stayed fairly consistent. So it's been cool to kind of see we've all been growing and kind of going on this journey together.
Yeah. That's interesting. And I'm gonna pivot into another, and it's very much aligned, but just alignment on core values, team alignment is obviously a key theme. I'm just curious your opinions on how finance, how they can kind of steward alignment within the organization. And what's one of the kind of key skills that is important to obtain to help you lead this?
Yeah, that's a good question. Visibility to the metrics that are important, right? So like behind, the goals of any organization are going to be financial metrics that you're going to want to be monitoring, right? And ultimately, the goal of any business is to make money. And making money allows us to do what we want to do in life, right? So making money helps us empower people to do it better, right? So if we're not making money, then we're not doing our jobs and we can't help the community and help our team members. So as far as like from a finance perspective, it's important to highlight those levers in the business that ensure that you're being financially responsible. So from in a manufacturing setting for us, obviously, selling the trailers is important, but from a production standpoint, we're definitely a very much production focused organization. So for example, a couple of years ago, our production teams, they were tracking their daily goals kind of on pen and paper, and they were tracking the number of units and what their throughput was themselves. And we as an organization, as a management team, we would set like the overall goals and say, okay, on our journey towards the BHAG, you need to be at 13 trailers, this week, or whatever that was. And we kind of just left it at that. And our production teams, they would work towards those goals. But invariably, there's always issues that come up, and you might only get 10 or 12, or maybe you do 14 the next week. But they weren't really monitoring on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
Well, I guess they were self-monitoring, I should say, those goals, right? And that was moderately successful in getting our production teams to achieve those goals on a consistent basis. But our, schedule slip, or the attainment to the schedule wasn't always there. So recently we've created dashboards that display that the exact same information, right? But it's visible in front of everybody to see exactly where they are down to the minute, as to where their production goals are for the day. And that simple change, just getting that information in front of our team members, the people who are doing the work, so that they can see at all times where they're at according to their goals, has increased our schedule attainment. Like, we're damn near at 100% schedule attainment every single day now, because we just have those numbers visible. So things like that, getting the right information in front of the right people is so important.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Integrated Business Planning Podcast, brought to you by ActionKPI. We're passionate about helping FP&A teams improve organizational performance through our FP&A Accelerator program, which includes a no-obligation implementation of our planning software. For more information about the program, please visit actionkpi.com/FPA-program.
It's interesting, right? It's like, just, you're right, having it visible. It's like you need to be looking at it consistently.
Right.
Just make focus and be like, hey, got to work a little harder because, we're maybe slipping or whatnot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's been really, really cool to see.
Yeah.
And
I guess has it motivated them, right? It sounds like it's kind of motivated them to move, as opposed to, and again, this is where it's, when you're setting stretch targets or whatnot, it's always it can be the other side, which is kind of demotivating. But it sounds like in your company, it's been pretty motivating to move towards.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's all the same information, the production incentives. So we'll give bonus pay if they're able to consistently hit schedules. And there's efficiency metrics and stuff like that we look at as well too. Like all of that was there before, and that hasn't changed. But just having that information visible is really, that's what's made the difference.
Interesting. And then I know you talked about this in the past, and I think, just around a kind of key skill, not just for finance, but just, with the management team, is around storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you can elaborate on, the importance or how you see storytelling and how it's helped you either in your role or, moving towards your BHAG.
Yeah, it's a good question, because and I think I look at storytelling from the perspective of trying to look into the future, versus I think a lot of time from a finance perspective, especially from an accounting perspective, you spend a lot of time in the past, and you're reporting on results that have already happened. And there's value there, especially from a confirmation point of view, right? Like if you're running the business correctly, then the results are just going to be a confirmation that you're running the business correctly, right? But you're definitely not getting as much value out of the numbers as you could be if you were forecasting the numbers. So the storytelling, in my mind anyways, comes from your ability to help people see what's important in the business. So from, like in my manufacturing world that I live in, like production throughput on a weekly basis is important. So building the story around how many trailers we want to manufacture this week, and with those dashboards, having that visible helps our production teams rally and create that story for themselves, right? From an efficiency point of view, like obviously how we manage our working capital is really important. So metrics around inventory days, receivables, kind of things like that, looking forward as to what we're expecting the week to look like, helps our teams really understand what their goals are for the week and what's important for them to be working on, so that we can continue in the right direction on our journey, right? So it's trying to make the numbers as dynamic as possible and give visibility to people so that they can change the numbers is where the power comes from.
So weaving, like, I'm a big proponent of this as well. It's all about, well, we say forecasting, but telling the story on how you can paint the picture, even over the next quarter. What does that look like? And communicating it in a way that probably shows how the individuals on the production line that are doing the daily work and hitting the daily targets is helping achieve goals over, maybe through working capital, through what you're trying to achieve from a revenue or profitability standpoint. So everyone knows that, hey, we've got our big community event, or working towards something that they feel they're part of, I guess, right? And it's a story that helps.
Exactly. And that's, so it's a there's a Japanese concept in the Toyota production system, Hogenson, cascading KPIs, right? So linking what I should be focusing on as a production worker to, the goals of the facility goals to the goals of the organization, right? And each support department likewise. So really helping everyone understand whether they're winning or losing each day, right? So, and then if you can give people that direction, then that creates more motivation and more buy-in. Something we like to do kind of outside of just financial goals and metrics as well too, to keep up morale and camaraderie, is every quarter we have a quarterly theme.
Yeah.
And it's generally focused either around safety or like a 5S initiative, cleanliness, something like that, quality, or just personal improvement. So our quarterly theme this quarter is better every day. So we want team members to set personal goals that are somewhat of a stretch goal. So to better either themselves from a professional standpoint or a personal standpoint, really doesn't matter. But we want everyone to be focusing on how they can be better at the end of this quarter than they are today. So we've got an entire team, like our marketing team, they're all smokers. They've all committed to stop smoking, for example. We've got people who are focused on saving money for weddings or for trips or, losing weight, kind of things like that, finishing renovations, some pretty cool goals that we've seen kind of come out of this. But it's cool for for everybody to be rallied around personal improvement or professional improvement. So, and that's important to keep people engaged, right?
Mm-hmm.
And from my perspective, anyways, it helps me realize that it's not always just about the business. It's about life as well too, right? And quality of life.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And if you have that engagement with your team members, then that allows us as a team, when times are a little bit more difficult, to stay cohesive and come through the other side together.
Yeah, building those just strong relationships. And that's really, really interesting. So I just want to dig into that just a little more, obviously setting quarterly targets. How do you kind of walk through that so everyone kind of sets it? You get together at the end of the quarter, do you discuss like what is the ground level tactical things that you're doing to encourage and just get people motivated to do those things?
We've keep it simple is what we've learned.
Yeah.
And because we've tried to track quarterly themes through spreadsheets and Microsoft Forms submittals and scan the QR code to submit your idea, for 5S initiative or things like that. But we've learned that the best way to get buy-in for our organization anyways, so we've got 550 team members. We manufacture out of 6 facilities and we're all fairly localized, all out of Lethbridge here within, a couple blocks radius. It's just pen and paper. So every team member, so we would write out our goal, and then we've got a peer who is checking in with us on a monthly basis.
Yeah.
And then we keep it fun. So it's just based off of points. So every team member gets a point for posting a goal. And then if they're continually working towards achieving that goal, then you get another point for each check-in. And then if you've achieved the goal by the end of September, then you get a point for that as well too. So, and then we'll have a big celebration if we reach 2,000 points by the end of the quarter. So all of our celebrations seem to revolve around food. So we're going to be having a big smoke off or barbecue or something like that.
Yeah. It's really itchy. And it's so important, like business, finance, and all that stuff, like at the end of the day, being part of something like that that's probably even more fulfilling, and people will go so much further to be want to be part of that, right? And it's
Yeah.
exciting, and so, and again, all weaved into storytelling and things of that nature. So,
Yeah. You're right though, because it's building that culture
yeah,
really allows you to achieve great things. And then from a finance perspective, like I said before, ensuring that the metrics that and that information that you're giving people helps them align to the goals of the organization, is what's important. So being able to define and substantiate those KPIs are definitely, that's been a definite struggle for us in the past, because production or ownership will come and say, well, we want to be monitoring this, and this, and that sounds great, but being able to pull that information quickly and reliably and accurately can really be a struggle at times, right? So from a finance perspective, I guess it's my role to say, okay, yeah, we can, let's work towards getting those numbers, or we can't right now because of X, Y, and Z, or maybe we need to look at things a little bit differently. Those conversations are so important. And once you have a metric defined, it might be good for 3 to 6 months, but maybe the environment that you're operating in has changed. And that might not be the most important thing that you should be looking at anymore. So you need to kind of be on your feet at all times as well too, and really understand what's driving the business.
and on that basis, you review those things on like a quarterly basis to making sure that keeping agile in that manner.
Yeah. So like if we look at our production KPIs, for example, so those are reviewed weekly, and we try to keep things simple. There's a really good example that I'd seen a couple of years ago from Goodyear out of the States, and they had just pen and paper, like a big dashboard, so a wall that listed all of their production facilities, and then they had 3 or 4 main KPIs that they were following for each facility, related to production goals and safety and things like that. But KPIs were either green because you're hitting your goals, or they were red.
Mm-hmm.
And so each facility was like in a column, and within 10 seconds, you could see where the issues were.
Yeah.
Whether there were safety issues, or maybe one facility had production issues. But they brought in like a school tour, some elementary kids, and they asked, the 7 or 8 year olds, hey, where do we need to focus this week in the business? And like all of them could be like, oh, look at this guy over here, or this production facility over here. Like it's all red. That's obviously a problem. So our production KPIs that we follow are all tracked against goals. And based off of the goal, you're very visual. It's either red or it's green. So and then we've got, I guess, rules around how we monitor those KPIs. So if you're green for too long, then that raises the question, well, maybe we should be maybe the goal's no longer appropriate because it's too easy, or we're not stretching ourselves hard enough, right? Or there again too, so then there will be a discussion around whether or not that KPI needs to change. And then likewise, if it's red for too long. So if it's red for more than 3 weeks, then our production team other managers will step in to help solve the issue and give support to that department or that facility to help them either reach the goal, or in some instances, if we're developing a new KPI that we really haven't been looking at before, and we might not have decent historical data, then we can say, well, maybe that goal is just unrealistic at this time and adjust the goal.
So, and again, it sounds like it's so important to just have, again, that open dialogue around that, right? So it's like, it's not like, well, I'll ask you the question, right? It's like management isn't going, you're going to achieve these KPIs, and then, people that line are like, there's not maybe there is a big debate between the two. But it sounds like in your culture, maybe I'm getting this right or wrong here, but it sounds like it's a pretty open dialogue around the KPIs and what's realistic, and being, not stretching people to the point where it's like they're not motivated to kind of achieve. So
yeah, it's a fine balance, right? Because you definitely need to be working towards the organization's goals, and we're moving towards that BHAG, and either you're on board with that or you're not, right? So there's definitely space for or times rather where ownership just needs to say, okay, this is what we need to achieve, and we'll work towards that and achieve it.
Yeah.
But so I guess a little bit more of a top-down approach, but at the same time, an important, like one of our core values, for example, that I had mentioned, with lead with humility. We know that we don't know everything, and there's an important Japanese principle, the idea that those who do the work know it best. So we realize that it's our production teams, that the individuals that are building the trailers, they have the most intimate knowledge of those production processes out of anyone in the organization. And it would be really, really what's the word? It would be really arrogant of myself or the rest of our management team feels the same way, to come in and say, okay, this is how you do things better, and dictate everything to those who know the work the best, right?
Yeah.
And in building a culture of continuous improvement, we really want to empower all of our team members to be able to come up with improvements themselves and kind of build your own destiny.
Yeah.
So that's something that we need to be really, really aware of as a company, to not ever stifle that open dialogue, right? So you're right, Lance. It's we try to make sure that any conversations when it comes to goals and metrics and the like is open and constructive as it can be.
All right, I'm gonna pivot again on another topic, more around systems, data management, and obviously cultures in place, KPIs defined. Now it comes into some of the systems and data that the importance of that.
Yeah.
So, from your experience, what's been the kind of a major transformation maybe you've seen through implementing a system, and how has it impacted maybe the finance teams or operation teams kind of efficiency?
It's a good question. Ultimately, the biggest benefits as far as, so take planning analytics, for example, or defining better data management processes in, because we deal with a bunch of different software systems, right? Nothing's more frustrating than having to kind of build ad hoc reports to get the information that you need, and comb through and spend time on retrieving data when the data should just be at your fingertips, right? And going back to the example of the production teams, I think that's probably, you know, like a big part of the problem that they were having is they were having to go into the system and pull the data themselves in order to know whether they were winning or losing on a daily basis. And that's just, that in of itself is really demotivating.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as you have the information right at your fingertips, displayed, easily visible, then you can make better decisions and towards achieving your goals. So from a system perspective, it's having information that's flowing automatically and aggregating automatically so that you can pull real-time data is, I think, vital to the success of any organization.
Yeah, it's flipping that, you know, it's, and again, seen time and time again, it's that 80-20 rule, right? Where, you know, 80% of the time could be collecting data and then 20% actually using it, analyzing it, making decisions off it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
The goal with any system is kind of flip that on its head. Be like, okay, let's spend 20% on the data collection or pulling some things together, and 80% analyzing, making decisions, creating forecasts, running scenario plans, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as you well know too, like we're really, like as a company and an organization right now, we're really focused on aggregating and creating one source of truth for the information that we're accessing. So right now, we've got an ERP system, we've got a payroll system, we've got a time and attendance system that we're trying to make work as an HR system, which has its own set of issues. And we've got like a maintenance software, we've got software for robotics, but it's all siloed information, right? And to be able to make connections between those silos is really time consuming, and it's difficult. A lot of our KPIs and dashboards right now are built in Excel, and we've built these houses of cards that are stacked upon each other, and you've got one dashboard that's referencing 14 other Excel sheets that are all tied into, you know, the database through SQL queries. And from a data management perspective, it's a mess. And if you forgot to, you know, refresh that one spreadsheet in the back room of D Hall, you know, you forgot about that was built 14 years ago kind of thing, then the whole system collapses. So kind of taking that information and putting it all into a data mart that you can start to build relationships between those silos is something that we're just, I guess that's a journey that we're just starting on, but I'm really excited to see the analytics that I know that can come from that.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I gotta think, you know, with the growth that you've been through as well, I think it's probably become more important to do some of those things, especially if you want to hit your, you know, 2035 goal, right?
Right.
And be operating with the same kind of systems as you did when you were, you know, 80 people versus 550 versus moving to what, 2,000, 5,000, you know.
Exactly, right? Because as an organization grows in size, that 1% difference off of a forecast, for a $10 million organization, being 1% off of your forecast that's not the end of the world. That's not going to shutter the doors. But if you're 1% off of a $500 million organization or a $1 billion organization, like 1%, all of a sudden, that's a really, really big number. Mm-hmm. So being accurate becomes all the more important.
And I think it helps, like, again, it's all people, process, technology, right? And mm-hmm. when you're, coming back to the storytelling, it's these kind of either systems or this kind of data mart where you're bringing the data together that can really help inform or help you tell the story or shape the scenario or shape the forecast on how you want it to be, right? And really make those scenario planning decisions, right, more accurately.
Yep. Yeah, and kind of play around with the numbers as well too. And if you build relationships between sales and product lines and like geographical information, to be able to start understanding what would it look like if we opened up a dealership in Missouri, and freight costs on average are this, and for us to be able to ship down there, start inputting all of those variables, then you can see how that will impact the business, right? So yeah, it's some kind of cool stuff. If you visualize that information as well, like for me, it'd be really cool to see, like on a map, graphical information, like sales per capita, or tie that into like housing starts in different areas, kind of things like that, to be able to really kind of understand where the opportunities are that we might be missing.
Market data, some of the market,
right?
And some external information. Yeah. How valuable do you think it is to create this kind of centralized repository, right? Because I think in some instances, organizations or people always think, okay, can use Excel to do this, so I'm not really not willing to invest, say, in something like this, right?
Right.
So how would you, from your perspective, put a value on the value of connecting data so that you can make better decisions?
I think Excel's great as a testing ground. Like if you've got like a concept of a report that you want to build, it's really easy to kind of put something together quick and dirty in Excel. Where Excel fails, from what I've seen, is the maintainability of those reports. It's really difficult over time to aggregate information and build historicals data using an Excel sheet. So then it becomes, so either that data is just lost to time, or you've got one individual that is the owner of that report and they move on, and it's just easy. There isn't any durability to that data. Another issue that I run into quite a bit is Excel-based reporting, or KPIs or dashboards or whatever you want to build. It's prone to errors.
Yeah.
Especially if you're trying to build relationships from one data set to another. Like if you don't have, if everything isn't updated when you're wanting to present that information, then you're working off of old data. And as soon as information that you give to a team is found out to be faulty because of one issue or another, then the trust in that report, from the organization's perspective, becomes eroded. And I think that puts you in a really dangerous position.
Yeah.
Because then a management team or a manager might be like, well, the report really doesn't mean anything anyways, so like I'll just go off and do my own thing. So having that trust in the accuracy and the reliability of information is really important. So having information in a central repository, and I've heard a bunch of different names for that central repository. We use Data Mart. I've heard Data Lake, right?
Yeah.
But that Data Mart allows you to pull information from those silos in real time, so it accurately represents what's going on in the business. So it helps build integrity in the data that you're presenting, and it allows you to kind of automate those relationships so that you're presenting information in a timely manner. And so having that trust is important for one, but secondly, allowing you to be able to start analyzing data across data sets. Like the value there is in being able to better accurately hone in and I guess rally the team better. It's like from a budget perspective, if you can identify like really quickly where there might be variances in the budget, like in real time, kind of as information's coming in, being able to execute on maybe an action plan to bring yourself back in line with budget, or things like that. Like they'll help you be a little bit more fiscally responsible. So there's definitely value in that regard. But I see the real potential in being able to analyze information across different silos. So like, efficiency metrics, take information from that HR silo and analyze it in different ways against your production data, right? Or bring in market information, things like that would really allow you to forecast better, but then respond to changes in the market quicker, right? So the faster that you can have information in front of you, then the quicker you're able to devise plans to kind of create your own destiny, right?
Yeah. Kind of capitalize on opportunities or mitigate risks that that may have gone unforeseen, and being able to track that whole business, I guess, the whole supply chain ultimately, and all, how you get from A to B. It's always, and again, having some of those also create these drivers, these business drivers that can help with a forecast, right? So that can also be a baseline or a KPI that you could use to help a forecast. And I know when we tend to forecast, you do it more at an average or aggregate level, but when you connect the data sources, there is that potential to get a little more granular, to better understand, to move away from the averages and really go in and understand, what's really shifting the needle in terms of, like a sales production forecast or what we're expecting. So.
Yeah, exactly. Because ultimately the averages, in a lot of circumstances, the averages just tend to be meaningless. Mm-hmm. And it's or difficult to action upon, right? But if you can build systems that allow you to peek into the future a little bit So like our sales backlog, for example, we've built dashboards around what we've got coming down the pipeline for each of our production lines. So that's allowed us to see, for one of our cargo lines, production might be curtailing, for example, right? So then that allows our sales team to action that, right?
Go drive more sales.
Yeah, yeah.
Go drive more activity on the cargoes, or just devise plans for ensuring production targets are met, I'm presuming, right? Whether that's maybe a pricing conversation or expanding on different customer base.
Yeah, exactly. But then having that visibility enables you to have those conversations before it becomes a problem.
Yeah, exactly. Being able to plan forward. So, got two more questions. Just again, one more. You're just obviously you've used Excel, and just wanted to ask you a question just around planning analytics specifically. More not just planning analytics, but I would say it as like more multi-dimensional modeling and forecasting. And so where you're seeing where, it previously you'd use Excel, you weren't aware of this other type of technology that could help you plan in a multi-dimensional way. Just explaining like from your perspective how you see things, how you saw things before, now how you look at things differently from that kind of lens of this new technology that you're using that's going to help you forecast,
So like, well, yeah, multi-dimensional planning. So planning analytics, and this is something that I just learned in the last 6 months, the difference between different types of databases, and planning analytics being based off of cubes, multi-dimensional data sets, which I find really fascinating. But what that allows us to do is start linking in a lot more robust of a way, like our budgeting processes with actuals and different data sets, so obviously any budget's built off of sales forecasts, and then you look at your production budgets and all of that good stuff. Being able to link that all together in a seamless manner, whereas you might have like prior in Excel, 14 tab spreadsheet that if your links and everything like that aren't all accurate, then it turn into a mess pretty quickly. But having that information in a cube like planning analytics has really allowed us to speed up that budgeting process. So it allows us to, I guess, more organically drive conversations. So like as conversations are happening, if one of our production facilities has a slight modification to how many trailers that they're going to be producing on product line A or B or C, that data can be inputted, and that automatically updates the budget as a whole, and you can links to sales, or how we're looking at our forecasting model, things like that. Like that data is a lot more integrated fully, and then it also, like, being multi-dimensional allows us to link in other types of data sets, so you're able to layer and build a much more robust mosaic or picture of the business that is not just multi-dimensional, but alterable. Like you can change it and see those changes and the impacts of those changes in real time, which is kind of cool.
Which is I always come back, integrated business planning, right? Where everyone's able to contribute to that model. right? And then you can see the impacts from sales,
Mhm.
production, from finance, from HR, right? Just being able to see that.
Well, and what's fun about that is it fits in very well with our conversational style of planning as an organization, because as those conversations are happening, you can be updating those budgets and those forecasts in real time. So it creates, or it allows that iterative process of any business to happen a lot more quickly and organically and seamlessly, ultimately.
Kind of changes the way you do things, right? So you kind of
Yeah.
rally around and plans are seen and made through a system. So I guess, and I see this as well, it kind of becomes part of the fabric, of how you, or the process on how you operate. You start to operate and plan in your business, right? It's
Yes.
helping it along. So I have one more question. Just obviously there's always a buzzword of AI. But two question, what's your perspective on AI, and do you have a vision on how you guys are thinking about using AI?
Yeah, it's definitely a buzzword, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And I I think, as a finance team is a lot of different organizations, we need to be careful of those buzzwords and really kind of understand the like really cool technology that underlies it, but understand like the purpose and how that technology is set up. So right now, a lot of AI applications are fundamentally language learning models.
Yeah.
So language learning models like ChatGPT are really good at natural conversation, but as far as providing factual information, is something to be wary of, right? So I think there's definitely potential there. Where I see potential would be like I look at our AP process, for example, and we utilize EDI, so electronic data interchange. And that system is great for allowing us to automate the AP process under a very rigid set of rules and circumstances. But as soon as something happens that's outside of those rigid rules, then the whole system blows up. And if that system's operating at volume, then you can run into a pretty big mess fairly quickly that you have to clean up manually. And then people start to question the whole purpose and efficacy of having something like that automated. So I see like AI technology as kind of taking a more broad approach, or I guess giving us the ability to more loosely define logic in processes and still have those processes handled in an automated way. So you might be able to throw an invoice at an AI system that might not follow all the rules of like something strictly defined in EDI, but it can use maybe a little, like it could recognize that, oh yeah, even though there's a smudge on this paper, and like where OCR technology had failed in the past, you could say like the AI would be able to look at that PDF document or that XML file or whatever and say, well, we know that it's from vendor A and it matches this PO, and although we don't have all the information, still be able to deal with the curveballs that inevitably get thrown into systems. So I see AI as allowing us to automate in a more organic way, if that makes sense.
Totally. Yeah, like more around automation. I see a perspective or just the value back to the data, the data mart or data warehouse, right? And going, you're at some point when you're structuring all this data, be it from the different source systems or from your forecasting systems, and bringing that together, and then if it's structured in the right way, using AI to maybe ask some business questions as well.
Yeah, exactly. So from an analytical perspective, so there'll be definite opportunities to, like on the automation side of business processes, that ultimately any logical process can be automated. And I see AI helping broaden the horizons of, I guess, what could be automated. But then I think more powerfully on the analytics side, being able to find those relationships that might not, and those correlations that might not be obvious when you're dealing with large data sets.
Yeah. Unforeseen by the visible eye. Right? Yeah. Awesome. Well, one last quick question and then we'll kind of close off here. Looking back at what you've done, your career, what advice would you give other, finance folks, business folks, based off your journey so far?
I think it's an exciting time to be in business. There's lots of opportunity out there. We're very fortunate to, at least where I'm at and where you're at, to be living in a land of plenty. And to always continue learning, I think, would be my biggest piece of advice. The technology is advancing in rapid ways. Naturally you have to kind of keep up on trends and things like that. But I think the fundamentals of business, good business anyways, have stayed consistent. So if you're operating your business in a way that helps build win-win relationships and it helps enrich your own life and in the lives of your team members and those in the community, then you're setting yourself up for success in years to come.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. Well, I think that's it. We'll sign off here. Again, thank you, Mattlan, for joining the podcast. Really appreciate your time and look forward to bringing you on again and learning more about your journey in maybe a year from now.
Sounds good. Much appreciated, Lance. I enjoyed the time that we spent today.
Thank you for watching this episode of the Integrated Business Planning Podcast. If you have a transformational story to tell or would like to drop some wisdom or share some insights about your experience or your journey, I'd love to have you on the podcast. So please reach out. Thank you.